Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Pakistan's army says India is playing a negative role in the region. In a statement, Director General of Military's Media Wing, Major General Babar Iftikhar said Pakistan has presented a dossier in front of the world. He said India's propaganda has been exposed after EU Disinfo Lab revelations. In Myanmar, thousands of protesters have marched for a third straight day in cities across Myanmar, demonstrating against last week's military coup. In the biggest city of Yangon, nurses and monks marched for the release of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Calls to join protests and to back a campaign of civil disobedience have grown louder and more organized in Myanmar. Haiti's Prime Minister Joseph Joth says his government has foiled a coup bid. Joth said a senior police official and a Supreme Court judge were among the 23 people detained with money, guns and ammunition. The arrests come after leading opposition figures announced a plan to replace President Jovenel Moise with a new head of state. The coronavirus infections tally in the United States has surpassed 27 million, with the death toll crossing 463,000. Meanwhile, Pakistan has received another shipment of COVID-19 vaccine from China for the country's armed forces. However, the military has announced to distribute the consignment to the frontline workers. The country's death toll has topped 12,000 with 59 fatalities overnight. While globally, the virus has claimed over 2.3 million lives and infected over 106 million people so far. And in cricket, Pakistan beat South Africa by 95 runs to clinch the two-match Test series 2-0. The Green Caps bowled out the Proteas at 274 runs. Hassan Ali's 5-wicket haul, combined by Shaheen Afridi's 4 wickets, steered the host to victory against the Proteas after 18 years. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from Pakistan, where the army says India is playing a negative role in the region. In a statement, Director General of the Army's Media Wing, Major General Babar Iftikhar, said Pakistan has presented a dossier on Indian terrorism in front of the world. General Iftikhar said the way India is collaborating with terrorist organizations is dangerous for all regional countries. He said New Delhi's propaganda has been exposed after the EU Disinfo Lab and United Nations reports. He also noted that the nation fought the pandemic successfully with the help of its healthcare workers. Also, Pakistan says India's unilateral actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir have paved the way for the world to intervene. It has urged the international community to compel India to implement the UN Security Council resolutions on holding a plebiscite in the valley. In an interview, Prime Minister's Special Assistant on National Security, Moeed Yusuf, said India is behaving like a rogue actor. He said New Delhi is playing a role as a spoiler in Afghanistan and undermining Pakistan's sovereignty and stability. Yusuf said India's relations with all neighbouring countries are getting worse under the BJP regime. The Special Assistant added New Delhi is involved in maligning Pakistan through fake NGOs breaking international laws. Now, President Joe Biden says the United States will not lift sanctions to get Iran to the negotiating table. In an interview, he said Iran needs to stop enriching uranium first to hold talks on the revival of the nuclear deal. Clarifying Biden's statement, the U.S. administration says Iran needs to stop enriching uranium beyond the permitted limit. The president's comments follow demands from Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei said Iran's final and irreversible decision is only to resume compliance with the deal if US lifts sanctions. Speaking to Air Force commanders, he said Iran has fulfilled all its obligations under the deal, but the United States and 3 European countries have not. Now moving to Myanmar, where thousands of protesters have marched for a 3rd straight day in cities across Myanmar, demonstrating against the last week's military coup. In the bigger city of Yangon, a large number of nurses and monks marched with workers and students for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. They flew red flags representing detained leaders, National League for Democracy Party, and raised anti-military slogans. Now, while thousands marched in the coastal city of Dawei and in the Kachin state capital, where they were dressed head to toe in black, calls to join protests and to back a campaign of civil disobedience have grown louder and more organized. Now, Haiti's Prime Minister Joseph Jout says his government has foiled a coup bid. The coup attempt came after leading opposition figures announced a plan to replace President Jovenel Moise with a new head of state.
In a news conference, Prime Minister Jout said a senior police official and a Supreme Court judge were among the 23 people detained with money, guns, and ammunition. Jout said that they aim to arrest the president and facilitate the installation of a new president. Following the incident, President Moise said that the plotters aim to make an attempt on his life. The opposition has been calling to pick a new president instead of waiting for general elections scheduled for September. But Moise has categorically stated that he will not step down until his term expires in 2022.
Now, China's top diplomat in the United States has accused Washington of blocking the free flow of technology and information. The envoy said increased U.S. involvement anywhere in the world has brought greater instability. In an interview, Ambassador Sui Tiankai said China was open to all American companies. He said it was unfortunate that technology and information had become politicized between the two countries. He added that Beijing is a firm supporter of multilateral institutions, while Washington was the real source of trouble. He also slammed the U.S. for inconsistency on the Paris Accord and urged Washington to join Beijing on climate action. Now, Pakistan has received another shipment of COVID-19 vaccine from China for the country's armed forces. This makes Pakistan's army the first foreign military to receive vaccine assistance from the Chinese People's Liberation Army. In a statement, the military's media wing said the jabs will be directed towards the national immunization drive. It said the decision was in line with the traditional spirit of Pakistan armed forces that the nation always comes first. Meanwhile, Pakistan's death toll from the coronavirus has topped 12,000 with 59 fatalities recorded overnight. The coronavirus infections tally in the U.S. has surpassed 27 million, with the death toll crossing 463,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.3 million lives and infected over 106 million people so far. More on coronavirus in this report.
The little bit progress that world achieves against the COVID-19 pandemic gets thwarted by new hurdles. South Africa says it is suspending AstraZeneca's vaccine after data showed it gave minimal protection against country's dominant coronavirus variant. Scientists say the strain accounts for 90% of new COVID cases in South Africa. In Brazil's Amazonian city of Manaus, indigenous groups get mass COVID-19 tests as cases soar in the region. Meanwhile, United States President Joe Biden says it will be difficult to reach herd immunity, defined as at least 75% of the population vaccinated by the end of the summer. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the United States has administered over 41 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. However, top health expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says currently the vaccine demand is greater than the supply in the country.
Well, it's just that. The demand clearly outstrips the supply right now. If you look at the escalation of availability of doses purely on the ability and the capability of manufacturing that, it's going to escalate and will continue to escalate as we go from February to March to April and beyond.
In Europe, more than 12 million people in the United Kingdom have received first dose of coronavirus vaccine as well, while the Netherlands has closed all COVID-19 test and vaccination sites after the authorities declared a rare code red warning over devastating snow blizzard. Greek Prime Minister is facing mounting anger over claims that he violated SOPs the very day health restrictions were tightened. Meanwhile, Australian cities of Sydney and Melbourne are on high alert over new COVID-19 cases.
Moving on now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has pleaded not guilty to corruption charges as his trial resumed. Netanyahu confirmed a written response submitted by his lawyers before a three-judge panel in Jerusalem District Court. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside the court following weekly protests held in recent months. The document argued that Netanyahu is not guilty of charges of bribery, breach of trust and fraud. He was indicted in 2019 for allegedly seeking regulatory favors for media tycoons in return for positive coverage, among other cases. Now the trial has started just 6 weeks before Israel's fourth parliamentary elections in 2 years. Now, the Israeli cabinet has approved a huge deal to buy warplanes, bombs and other advanced military equipment from the United States. Israeli state media said the $9 billion deal includes Chinook helicopters, F-35 and F-16 warplanes and aerial refueling tankers. It said the finance ministry has opposed the deal as Tel Aviv will need loans from U.S. banks to finance the plan. However, it said the decision was reached after a 7-hour-long cabinet meeting led by Defense Minister Benny Gantz. State media added the decision followed 3 years of delay to strengthen Tel Aviv's air forces. The United States, which is Israel's largest military supporter, announced $38 billion in military aid over the 10 years. Now, the United States has expressed deep concern over continued Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia. U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price called on the group to cease further attacks on civilian areas in Saudi Arabia. Price also urged Houthis to halt any new military offensives inside Yemen, which will only bring more suffering to the Yemeni people. He urged the Houthis to demonstrate their commitment to constructively engage in UN envoy Martin Griffiths' efforts to achieve peace. This came after the Arab coalition intercepted 5 explosive Houthi drones launched towards Saudi Arabia in 2 separate assaults. Now, UN envoy to Yemen Martin Griffiths has discussed ways to resolve the Yemeni crisis with the Iranian officials in Tehran. Iranian state media said Foreign Ministry official Ali Asghar Khaji called for settling the conflict through political means. Khaji called for holding Yemeni talks and forming an all-inclusive government with the help of all political parties. Khaji also indicated Iran's readiness to deliver humanitarian and medical aid to Yemen. Griffiths is on a 2-day visit to Iran to support agreement among stakeholders and resume the political process. Now moving on to the United States, where Republican senators have backed former President Donald Trump, calling his impeachment trial a waste of time. This precedes Trump's impeachment trial on charges of incitement of insurrection in the Senate on Tuesday. The GOP senators argued that Trump's fiery speech before the Capitol riots does not make him responsible for the violence. They termed the trial unconstitutional and a farce, saying it will divide the country. The Republican lawmakers said they believe the former president should and will be acquitted. Now, Pakistan has sent search and rescue teams to locate the missing climbers on K2 for the 3rd straight day. Pakistan's Muhammad Ali Satpara, along with John Snorri from Iceland and J.P. Moore from Chile, went missing while descending the K2. Pakistan's military's media wing says the army would not leave any stone unturned in the search operation. DG ISPR Major General Babar Iftikhar said Ali Satpara is a national hero. Yesterday, speaking to the media after reaching Skardu from the base camp, Sajid Ali Satpara said a rescue operation is only possible to search for the bodies. He confirmed the climbers scaled the peak on Friday and came across an accident while descending. He was part of the search operation while failed to locate climbers for a second day on Sunday. Now, the Indian government has once again asked Twitter to block more than 1,000 accounts linked with the farmers' movement. Twitter so far has not acted on the government's complaint. The latest direction comes days after the centre asked the social media giant to block 250 accounts over allegations of misinformation. Meanwhile, thousands of people attended a Grand Village Council meeting in Haryana state as part of the protest against the farm laws. Farmers feared the laws will leave them at the mercy of big corporate buyers. Now, tens of thousands of farmers have been braving New Delhi's winter for months on national highways, while over 175 people have lost their lives during the protests. Now, in northern India, at least 18 people are dead and 200 missing after a piece of a Himalayan glacier fell into a river and triggered a huge flood. The floodwaters burst open a dam and a deluge of water poured through a valley in the state of Uttarakhand. Officials say most of the missing are believed to be workers from the 2 hydropower plants in the area. Rescue workers are focusing on a 2.5-kilometer long tunnel where they said 30 to 35 people could be trapped. Authorities said there had been no voice contact yet with anyone in the tunnel. Now, Sunday's violent surge swept away a small hydroelectric project and damaged a bigger one further downstream. Officials say 25 people have been rescued so far. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, moving on with the news stories, the European Union says Russia has rejected an opportunity for constructive talks with the bloc. European Union top diplomat Josep Borrell says Europe must draw the consequences, including the possibility of new sanctions. In a blog, Borrell said the bloc's foreign ministers will decide the next steps. Responding, a Russian Foreign Ministry representative said the European Union's policy chief's remarks contradicted what he said in Moscow. Borrell had said although EU-Russia relations are far from satisfactory, diplomatic channels should remain open. He engaged in the first major diplomatic talks with Russia in 4 years after the alleged poisoning and arrest of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Now, Ecuadorians are headed for a runoff presidential election following Sunday's vote. Leftist economist Andres Arauz drew the most votes, but not enough to secure an outright victory. The National Electoral Council says a quick count shows Arauz with 31.5% of the votes. Indigenous environmental activist Yacu Perez has 20.04% and conservative banker Guillermo Lasso won 19.97%. It is still too close to call whether Arauz will face Perez or Lasso in the second round. But his win moves the nation a step closer to socialism following years of austerity measures made more painful by the pandemic. Now, since the COVID-19 outbreak, different methods have been used to counter the symptoms of the disease. The latest comes from Bolivia's El Alto, where indigenous residents are using herbal medicines to ward off the virus. This report has details.
Before COVID vaccines came to the fore, modern medicine was having a tough time against the virus. But that hasn't stopped Bolivians from lining up to use a steam booth for herbal medicine. They say this pre-Hispanic tradition works by boosting the body's respiratory system.
They free the respiratory tract and lungs from lack of oxygen. All this is to prevent this disease, which is the coronavirus. For us, these medicinal plants are natural and they are excellent for our organism because God created them.
Once inside the booth, they receive a steam treatment with herbs such as eucalyptus and chamomile.
These herbs are for fever and COVID-19. This plant is called Carlosento and this one is called Anahuaya. Earlier, we did not value these plants. However, they have turned out to be very good for treating COVID-19 disease. These plants take away all the fever.
The second wave of COVID-19 has battered Bolivia's ailing healthcare system. With many hospitals pushed to the brink of collapse, pre-Hispanic traditions might be the only option for few.
Now, this year's Spring Festival Gala of China Media Group boasts a record number of dance programs which will incorporate new technologies. Let's find out more in this report.
Entering in the Chinese New Year, China Media Group will air the annual Spring Festival Gala this week. It will be the biggest stage in the program's history and a combination of 5G, 8K HD, artificial intelligence and virtual reality technologies. The blockbuster program will air live on February 11, Chinese Lunar New Year's Eve, to welcome the year of the ox with songs, performances, comedy, sketches and much more.
This year's stage provides us with very good performance conditions. It is the widest one in the history of the Spring Festival Gala and also the most beautiful. It is 30 meters wide. Such a large stage can usually only be seen in stadiums.
Following tradition, the gala will highlight some of the most important events from the past year.
We are striving for an emotional expression this year. For example, with works on poverty alleviation, welcoming the centenary of the founding of the Communist Party of China and battling the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as song programs, we hope to touch audience members' hearts, bring them warmth, or make them think.
On New Year's Eve, more than 600 media outlets from over 170 countries and regions will broadcast and report the show. The gala, also known as Chanwen in Chinese, has been broadcast live annually since 1983. It is the most important cultural symbol of the Chinese Lunar New Year and the most watched television program in the world.
Now, European stocks are trading higher at the week's start, with markets tracking positive sentiment in Asia and the United States. Frankfurt shares rose by over 0.5%, outperforming the European peers in early trading, while London's FTSE rose up by almost 0.5% and French CAC edged up 0.6%. The pan-European stock 600 index edged up by 0.4%, adding to previous week's gains of 3.5%. Global markets also started the week on a stronger footing. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. That is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.